Hi everyone, it's Miss Akbari in the library, and I wanted to tell you about a graphic novel series that I think is really interesting and really important, and especially great if you like history and information about the civil rights movement. It's called March, Book One, Book Two, and Book Three, and it was written as sort of a collaboration, sort of a group project between Representative John Lewis and Andrew Aden and Nate Powell, who were authors and the graphic artists that helped bring this together. A little bit about John Lewis. John Lewis was born in 1940. He got involved in the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, and then served as a United States representative, so in the government, from 1987 until the year 2020 when he passed away. So he was a very important figure in the civil rights movement as well as a very important politician. And he wrote this book to kind of talk about his experiences through the civil rights era. So it's sort of like a biography, but told as a graphic novel. And so these are some pictures of John Lewis when he was younger. And you can see here he's talking to the police. He was arrested over 40 times as part of his civil rights work that he did. And if you've heard about Martin Luther King Jr., you probably are familiar with the peaceful protest movement that he was really all about. And John Lewis was part of that as well. So he got involved by going to lunch counters that were segregated, which meant that white people sat in a certain section and black people sat in a certain section, usually not as nice a section, didn't have as much access to the nicer parts of the restaurant. And so John Lewis and several of his group would just go to the lunch counter and sit and try to be served and ask questions politely and just sit very quietly, very calmly. They never resorted to any sort of violence, but very frequently got arrested. So you can see those pictures there. If you look at the bottom picture on the left, that's John Lewis speaking at the March on Washington, which we probably know as the place that Martin Luther King Jr. made his I Have a Dream speech. And then the very bottom photo on the right is John Lewis with Martin Luther King Jr. So John Lewis became a very important leader in the civil rights movement in the South in the 1960s. And so the three books kind of talk about those different eras. So the first book really talks about his early life. It talks about him meeting Martin Luther King Jr. for the first time and him getting involved in the nonviolent protest movement, the lunch counters. They picketed movie theaters as well. In book two, John Lewis got involved in the Freedom Riders. And so that was kind of an extension of the bus boycott. Maybe you've heard of Rosa Parks and the bus boycott that happened in the South. And John Lewis got involved in that as well. And he not only was he arrested 40 times, but he got hurt and hospitalized multiple times. And then finally in book three, it kind of talks about the March on Selma, and maybe you've heard of the movie Selma, or maybe you've heard of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, but that was kind of the end event of this book series. And so you can see some pictures from that. Later in life, Representative Lewis was awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Obama, and that's a medal that's given for service to our country. And so again, if you are interested, I learned a lot by reading this book, or these three books, I should say. And I thought I knew quite a bit about history, and I thought I really knew kind of the basics about the civil rights movement, but there was a lot that I learned specifically by hearing his story. And it was really impressive how much determination and courage Representative Lewis and the many other people he worked with in that movement showed, and how really important that is to where things are today, even though there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. So if you like nonfiction, if you like graphic novels, if you like learning about history, I would highly recommend the series March.